I would like to go over our healing paradigm from a different perspective in a way that I think is more useful and applicable in daily activity. And in fact, this healing paradigm that we have been exploring of motivation, invocation, compassion, empowerment, and wholeness can have a trajectory of a whole lifetime. Or, as I've been experiencing lately, it can be something that you go through that trajectory within the course of a breath or a few breaths. As we begin, let's talk about motivation. The motivation part isn't so much the breath to two breath trajectory, but traditionally the motivation practice is taught as a deep contemplation. We've been just tacking it on at the beginning of the meditation. For a couple of minutes, I asked you to think about you're going to die, but you don't know when. Life is precious. There's karma. There's suffering. Or whatever other motivating truth might be useful in the context of our evening together. But the way these truths are typically worked with is you choose one of them. You choose, say, the preciousness of human birth. And you really begin to work with that on a daily basis. What does it mean that you have this human birth, that a human birth is hard to come by and it's easy to lose? How do you bring meaning to your life? So that as you're going through your day and you're deciding, am I going to do this or am I going to do that? You can have somewhere in the back of your mind, how is this bringing meaning into my life? How am I really keeping alive this truth that this life is such a precious thing to have? So that I would encourage people, I would encourage us, including myself, to pick one of these truths and work with it. I mean, certainly, if you're working with a friend who's dying, or if you have a relative who's very ill, that the truth, you're going to die, but you don't know when, and life is precious, both of those are like right up in bold print right in front of your face on a moment-to-moment basis. Some of the other things that people have been bringing up certainly bring to the fore truths about suffering and karma in our lives. So rather than just have this as an interesting intellectual idea at the beginning of practice, pick one of these and dive into it. But the part that I discovered, here's what I found interesting. And typically we have talked about our path in the Buddha sense, or sometimes in the somatic sense of getting grounded and centered in boundaries. I'd like to talk about it more tonight from the point of the path of the heart. So let's use as examples two mantras. One of them is the Jesus prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. And the other one is the Chinrezi mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, the mantra of Chinrezi, the god of compassion, the patron saint of Tibet. So in terms of invocation, I actually finally went back to the dictionary, and invocation means summoning or calling forth. And if you're summoning something, it means it's not there yet. It's something that you're not feeling. So that the first stage of saying a mantra is, I'm not feeling compassion. I'm lost in my life now. I'm lost in my mind. Something's going on. And I'm going to start saying this mantra from the standpoint of, I know compassion exists. I'm not feeling it. I am going to begin to try to bring it forth, to call it into aliveness in my experience, in my direct experience, by saying this mantra from that standpoint. So I'm saying, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, feeling that I don't have that mercy yet. I would like to begin to feel it. Or Om Mani Padme Hum means Om, hail the jewel at the center of the lotus of your heart. I'm not feeling that jewel in the center of my heart. I would like to feel it. There is this dualistic asking. We begin asking dualistically because we're not feeling it yet, which is why we get centered and grounded, because we're not feeling centered and grounded. Or why we begin to pay attention in a vipassana in a sense, because we weren't paying attention. But here we're talking about this coming from the standpoint of mantra. So that as the mantra then continues, as there's an I who is saying this mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, over and over and over again, after some time. Maybe it takes 10 years. What I was experiencing during this week is maybe it takes 2 or 3 recitations of the mantra. You say the mantra and you begin to feel that quality that the mantra embodies. You begin to feel the love of Christ, devotion towards Christ, devotion towards Chinrezi, the compassion of Chinrezi in your heart. You begin to have a direct experience. There is an I who's having an experience of that which is being invoked. So we begin to move from the invocation stage to the compassion stage, that we're having that experience of love, compassion, devotion, gratitude, mercy, beginning to arise in the heart. So there's a wonderful place to be. And in fact, some people hang out there for a lifetime. They love that relationship, that dualistic relationship with the beloved. Just resting there in, I love God in the form of Chinrezi or Christ or the Mother, or there are people who are real Buddhists who fall in love with the Dharma. They fall in love with truth. And they're in love with this search for truth. But there's a very loving quality, as if one were with the beloved. And that's a juicy, wonderful place to be that adds, obviously, a great ability to be with what you were not feeling when you were in the invocation stage. But then, as this quality begins to deepen, as the way you're saying the mantra begins to change, first of all, you're in the invocation stage, I'm pounding out this mantra because I'm adrift in a stormy sea without a life preserver, and over there is one of those life-saving round things, and you grab onto that. That's the mantra. And then as you grab onto it, you start to feel the trust, the safety, that your heart begins to open. And as it opens enough, then the way you say the mantra changes. You're saying it with this sense of devotion, and as the devotion deepens, then the mantra begins to say itself. There isn't so much the I that's saying the mantra, but you begin to rest in that quality that the mantra embodies. And you begin to see that that is your nature, that love, that compassion is who you are. And as you begin to experience that then becomes the empowerment stage, where possibly you're not even saying the mantra anymore, but you're feeling that you are the essence of the mantra. That this Christ quality, this Chinrezi quality that you have been invoking and then having devotion to, is actually who you are. And that not only who you are, but you are empowered to embody, in terms of body, speech, and mind, that energy in your activity. As Christ says in the Bible, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but he says something like, all these things that I do, these miraculous things, I walk on the water, I change the water into wine, I raise the dead, I heal the sick, all these things you too can do if you believe in me. So that what he's saying is that when the mantra gets to the point where you begin to realize that you are that is your Christ nature, then you can do those things too. And as that deepens, then there's not even a mantra anymore, there's not even empowerment. It then moves into beyond practice of the non-dual state of wholeness. That not only are you Christ consciousness, not only are you the embodiment of Chinrezi and able to be Chinrezi in activity, not just in your imagination, but in actuality, you are Chinrezi. Beyond that, it is all of that nature. There is nothing other than Christ. And that is one of the big complications in the Bible, because sometimes Jesus is talking and there's stuff other than Jesus, but there's nothing other than Christ. What I was finding is that in my own practice, I spent probably a decade pounding out mantras from the invocation stage, wanting to feel something. And I'd feel it for a moment, and then I'd kind of, like that, and then go back into pounding out invocation stage mantras. And what I was experiencing during this week was that I could just say one or two mantras from that stage when I was lost, taking me right into this feeling of devotion and gratitude, taking me into this selfless place out of which empowerment grew, and there was spaciousness, and it's all the same taste. And that whole thing took 5 seconds. There are even traditions that encourage you to get stuck in some of these initial ways to do things. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. What we're doing here is an integrated developmental approach to spiritual development. And it certainly is possible to just go into the devotional stage and go so deeply into that you disappear, and that's all there is. But in terms of the developmental way we're approaching practice here, I am offering an encouragement to explore the possibility of going beyond limiting self-assumptions that are telling you you have to stay caught in a certain way of relating to your practice. That just by saying Om Mani Padme Hum once, it can take you from being lost in your mind and carry you right through the whole path that we've been talking about. Or any mantra that comes to you, or any devotional feeling. And I don't want anybody to feel that because you don't have a guru or a particular deity that sets you on fire when you think about this being or idea. That's fine. But at least the search for truth. At least that you know that the way through is by going towards truth rather than by grasping at pleasure. There's seeking truth and there's clinging, and that the love for truth will bring you through to the other side. Any comments about these remarks?
I've been thinking about humanness and how much, like having a meal, the pleasure of having a good meal sometimes can ease and calm, like pain of going through each day in sort of the humanness that I'm in right now. Like, this is who I am, this is what's incarnated. And sometimes I get lost in, trying to go to a mantra, trying to do this, and it feels like I'm going away from like who I am. And it's like two different ways of using a mantra. One to pull me out and one to just mask what I'm doing. And that's like a confusion I have sometimes. But
at the last group, we did an exercise where we broke down into dyads. We've done this here, but not for the last year or so, probably. We never get around to it. Probably never since you've been here. And the exercise was dyads, meditator, and talker. And the meditator gets grounded and centered and opens her or his heart. And the talker begins to talk about their life, maybe something that's been difficult lately. And the meditator's job is to find a balance between not just meditating and losing touch with this relationship that is going on between you and the speaker, but at the same time not get lost in the story. To find the balance between being clearly aware of the ways that you start grasping or pushing away feelings that are arising in relationship to the content, and at the same time staying in touch with that other person. And it's an off and on again thing, of course. And in fact, one of the people in the group said that they didn't know if they could do that because they didn't know if they could meditate with their eyes open. really the point here is not about becoming a good meditator, or not being a great sayer of mantras. I mean, I have a friend, I know this guy who wore out about 5 malas. He wore them down to small little nubs because he kept saying so many prayers on his rosary beads that by the end of, he'd wear it down, then he'd get another one. And he's somebody who actually really needed to do that, it turned out. Whether it's mantra or whether it's being present in a Buddha sense or whether it's being embodied in a somatic sense or using all 3 of these channels, these are channels that are very amenable and consistent with being present with human activity, with relationship, with driving an automobile, with earning a living. I will admit that it's harder to do these things when you're in front of a computer screen, or it's harder to do it if somebody's angry at you. There's no doubt about that. But the point is that one can begin to practice finding this balance in times in your day when it's not so extreme. And yes, there is a conflict, as long as we're making these assumptions, which actually aren't true assumptions. It's the ego structure trying to say, wait a minute, this isn't going to work. But in fact, what we're actually doing here is unlearning, just getting out of the way and being an open-hearted, present human being, which does not take extra energy eventually. In the beginning, it's changing your focus, changing the way you're relating to your experience. But even that is easier in some fundamental way than being lost in your experience. Any other remark?
I like the process. It was clearer to me about how a mantra or a call to prayer or any of these things are like the key to a door into another dimension.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that image, but I haven't put the mantra piece together with that in the same way. So that was helpful. That's good.
I would think as a Sufi you do say a lot of mantra or prayer. Or, what do they call those? The 99?
The 99 names of God, yeah.
Yeah. So you can just take one of those and go through the process just the way I was talking about.
Right.
That in the beginning you're wanting that quality in your life, and then you're beginning to feel, and then you're becoming it, and then that's it.
Yeah.
It seems similar to what a good counselor does, listening to you, but not letting you get too lost. And then maybe that counselor gets internalized, like it does over the years of therapy with one person.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, what I'm attempting to do here is some kind of melding of self-therapy with and self-somatic awareness with spiritual practice. Any comments before we meditate? Steve?
I'm assuming you had your machine recording?
Pardon?
I'm assuming your machine loading?
Yeah. And it's,
extended remarks I thought were amazingly good.
Thank you. I don't know about the amazing part, but it came out.
So one question is, mantras, like I don't have one mantra, but I mean, what suggestions do you have for those of us that are not in a devotional
realm? Well, I don't have a general suggestion. Generally, there isn't. Somebody has their suggestion, and then people come to that teacher because they like that suggestion. So that what I would suggest to Hutch or Steve or Terry and you would be 4 different things. And not that these people are asking. I picked them because they probably have their things already, and I think I kind of can guess what qualities those have for these three guys. But
it's a great question to hold. And
so it doesn't have to be a mantra. I was using the mantra metaphor as the way of the heart. you're a very heartfelt person, even though you haven't been on an overtly devotional path yet in your life, it seems. I mean, at least that's my take on things. It isn't necessarily the case that there's a word, although I find having a word or a phrase very useful, because particularly for me that has this mathematically trained mind, there can be, when I get lost, there's a lot of mental activity. Maybe that's true for everybody, but I know it's certainly very true for me. So that to have something that's as strong as any mental activity, that I can start pounding out this mantra that I got from my guru, and just say it till I begin to feel it, and then surrender into that feeling, and then the feeling takes me to this other place. But to be alert to when that feeling begins to arise, so that I don't stay at the pounding level any longer than absolutely necessary. If there isn't a mantra that has appeared, first of all, you can just ask for something to appear, ask for a dream, or ask for something to come to you. At the same time, it doesn't have to be a phrase. It can be just a feeling in your heart that it's like a prayer. Let my heart be open. Maybe you're not saying those words, but when you're stuck in your mind, when you're lost, you go into your heart and you ask that you find a way through there, which you've been doing lately. And then be alert to when that which you're asking for begins to arise, to begin to bubble up, or whatever it feels, whatever feeling metaphor we can use there. So this bubbles up, and then you go into that feeling. You surrender into that feeling. You feel gratitude for that feeling being there. You feel devotion to a universe that is taking you beyond suffering into your heart. So to reiterate, it is certainly possible to go through all those stages in the course of one breath, one saying of a short prayer. Even though we're making these discrete ideas and discrete stages, in a way it's only explicating a very smooth process of surrender into who we actually are. What was becoming clear to me, there is a danger in spiritual practice that we get caught in the practice, that we feel we need it at a certain level, so we stay there and keep doing something, rather than allowing that to be a doorway into the vastness of truth, the vastness of heart.